and he probably wouldn't even recognize his own parents because of the drugs in his system. But that's the person who comes to my mind when I think of somebody who's failing. But it could be anyone, but just get a picture of someone who's failing terribly. Okay, so now let's say that person is also standing in the room with you, and have that person come over and stand on your left-hand side. So now you have two people in the room with you. The one on the right is the person who is beautifully, wonderfully successful in life, and the one on the left is the person who is failing. And look at those two people and ask yourself the question, what's the difference between these two individuals? One of them so successful, life is working, spiraling up, and the other person, life is not working, things aren't good, and life is spiraling down. What's the difference between those two individuals? And the answer is, the difference is their programs. The difference is what got wired into their brains. And the most astounding thing about that example is this. Those two people that we're looking at now, one so successful, the other failing so badly. Those could have been the two little infants that we looked at in the newborn nursery. And their lives were waiting to be fulfilled, and then one of them ended up over here succeeding, and one of them ended up over there failing. That picture is so incredibly important because it tells us, it allows us to ask the question, where am I? Am I moving over here towards success, or am I over here moving towards failure? Because at one time, you and I were in those little bassinets in the newborn nursery, and we were born to succeed.
Wow. What a great explanation. I mean, your word pictures, I actually saw the infants in those little clothes, little blankets. I almost saw their eyes and their smile. At the same time, I saw them when they were grown up. And I saw person A and person B. What a great explanation. I guess with that said, then how do you explain the science then between self-talk and how it actually works? You kind of already did that to a certain degree, but how do you explain the science of that? Because I use self-talk all the time. We encourage our leaders and family members and people who we love and admire to use self-talk. How do you explain the science behind it? If that's a sensible question to ask.
It is. In the brain, it's very complicated, but I've spent the last almost 40 years doing my best to simplify it and to make it clear. Since the moment we were born, every message wired in permanently. And what happens is we're designed to learn through repetition. In fact, the secret to success, some people think it's education, some people think to success for all of us is repetition, repetition, repetition. Everyone in the world of sports understands that really well. The secret to success is repetition. So scientifically what's happening is our brain is getting wired with all of these messages, and that part of the brain that stores those messages doesn't know what's true and what's false. It just acts on the strongest programs as though they're true. So our self-talk, what we say without even thinking about it, on an average day, people can say things like, I'll never amount to much, or I never have any luck, or everything I eat goes right to my waist, or nothing works out for me, or I couldn't possibly do that, or I'm not big enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not smart enough, or whatever it is. Those little messages that we thought were harmless are not harmless at all. Those thoughts, those messages, whether we say them out loud or just think them to ourselves, those messages are literally, right now, wiring our brain. So the person can say, oh, I can't remember names. I am just no good at names. I have the world's worst memory. And then that person goes to a group gathering and they meet someone and they want to remember that person, and 7/10 of a second later the name is gone, and they're going through the alphabet trying to remember what that person's name is, and their brain meanwhile is saying, oh, you can't remember that name. I'm just doing what you told me to do. You've been telling me for the last 37 years you can't remember names. Got it. Done deal.
Oh, boy. I'm glad I'm answering these questions, but I'm starting to feel guilty. I'm getting flashbacks about me, really, on so many things you're saying right now. And I only wish the world could hear this, and hopefully they will when this interview is over. But secret to success: repetition, repetition, repetition. Wow. You get what you say, obviously, and repeatedly over and over again. Interesting. With that said, and obviously all ages, all background, I've heard people say, I'm too old to change my thinking, my programs. I mean, is that true? I mean, is it ever too late to change one's programs?
We
Is there
did
such a thing as being too old?
At one time, we thought that that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And that's what we were told. Turns out not to be true. From the field of neuroscience, we've learned now that we never stop learning. We never, as long as we're breathing, we have the potential to grow. We have the potential to change, because the brain is still, at any age, is working very hard to wire itself with old dog new tricks. They began to give up, even in middle age, when things weren't working as well as they wanted them to. They would slow down, or they would stop, or they would say, well, I guess I'm past my prime, or I'm not going to be able to do this. The people who do the best in life and have the greatest sense of well-being are the people who never, ever stop telling themselves that they can do it, that they can succeed, that they can make it. And that's not Pollyanna thinking. That's that kind of the self-talk that says, I can do this, I'm up to this, I was born to succeed, and it's a natural way for me to be. That's not Pollyanna thinking. That's just setting the record straight. That's getting it right, sometimes for the first time.
Oh, so there's hope for everyone, obviously, regardless of age.
Yes,
It's a matter
for all
of
of
choice.
us.
It's a matter of choice and free will. Obviously we cannot insulate ourselves or isolate ourselves from family or negative associations. But the question I have for you is, can the association with these type of people, okay, who speak negative all the time, affect our positive programs when we're around them? Can they affect that or change that in some way?
It is true that we have to be careful about the people we surround ourselves with, because those people, without trying to, are programming us. Because we're getting their messages also, we're getting their input. But here's the key, and this is important to remember. The strongest program always wins. So if you have programs that, if your self-talk is good, if it's positive, if it's strong, and if it's repeated in the right way, your programs will get stronger and stronger. The positive programs will get stronger and stronger. And then when you meet up with someone, or you're surrounded by people who are negatroids, or we all know them. They're people who, and it's not their fault, it's just their programs. When people are negative, they're just repeating the programs that they got. They didn't try to. But so there are people like that, and when we're around them, their programs win if our programs are also negative. So our programs will then agree with theirs, and so their programs win. And negativity builds negativity. But if our programs are very positive and very strong, then our programs will override the programs of the negative people around us. When I'm in a group of people who are negative, first off, I try not to be there. I'd rather be surrounded with people who are very up and going for it and positive, which is one of the reasons I like what you're doing. and your team. But when I'm in an environment where there is a lot of negative happening, I'm constantly helping myself be aware of my own thoughts, my own messages to myself. And that's a good thing to remember right now when we're hearing a lot of bad news on television and on social media. We hear a lot of bad news, but we can override that by constantly being aware. It's called mindfulness, being aware of our own thoughts and our own messages to ourselves. That will make a difference.
Very good. Well, these are excellent answers, Shad. Thank you so much. So the strongest program wins out, which is important. That's why we need to kind of insulate ourselves so we can override some of those negative thoughts or the direction people trying to lead us in. I never correct people, ever. When I'm around people who are negative, if someone's in my business, a family member who I love and close to, and someone in my business who wants to succeed, and I'm close to them, and they allow me to speak with them and talk honestly with them, I may say a few things about their negative self-talk, but for the most part, I never correct people. I just realize who not to associate with for too long, and just realize why they are where they are today. With that said, when I get around people sometimes who don't understand self-talk, and I'm always talking in a positive manner, I'm not sure if they believe that or not, but some people say they don't believe in self-talk. It doesn't really work. It's brainwashing. How would you, Dr. Shad Helmstetter, how would you respond to that question? If someone said, yeah, it's just brainwashing, I don't believe any of that garbage.
I would give them the science. And the science is this. People who think in the positive, people who speak and think in the positive, actually grow more neural networks in the left prefrontal cortex of their brain. So that's right there. If you're watching right now, you reach up and touch just above your left eye. That's approximately where the left prefrontal cortex is. And people who speak and think positively grow more neural networks in that area of the brain. So it gets larger, it gets stronger. And interestingly, that's the area of the brain, or one of the areas of the brain that helps us find solutions, solve problems, and take action. So that's what keeps us going and helps us win. On the other hand, people who think negatively and speak negatively frequently, they're actually growing more neural networks in the right prefrontal cortex of their brain, right here. And that's the part of the brain that gets us to avoid problems, stop finding solutions, and either fight or run and hide. So that's the part of the brain, that's one of the parts of the brain that helps us fail. So it's just science. People who think positively, people who use positive self-talk, they're not kidding themselves. They're wiring their brain to win.
I find people, Shad, that I'm around who aren't in my business or who I don't associate with a whole lot. I could tell I attract a lot of people just because I talk differently than they do. They like hearing it. It makes them feel good. I'm constantly uplifting them, and I just think that's something we all need to do. And I attribute that understanding and that thinking to you and your books and everything you've done. I attended your seminars live, read your books, and I heard you say in your books and live to me, who crippled us, that when a person's 18 years of age, maybe high school age, they had heard over 148,000 no's or rejections in their life. And it's programmed into their brain. Now, many of us hearing this message right now have small kids, infants. Many of us right now have grandchildren, like I do. I'm proud to say I've got several grandchildren, okay? Cute as anything. What is the proper wording to correct a small child if doing something wrong? If they're running into the street because they don't understand danger, touching a hot stove, or anything to prevent them from being in harm's way. What is the proper wording to use instead of saying, no, don't do that, no. When I hear you say almost 130,000 rejections or no's in your life, how do you correct? What is the proper words to use with a young child this way so you're not programming them in a negative way, but also keeping them out of harm's way?
balance the directive with a positive about them. So that means you can say to a child, as an example, that worked against you. That was something you should not have done. And as I've said to you before, you are better than that. In fact, I'm amazed at how organized you really are. So maybe you didn't clean your room and you were supposed to, but I've also noticed many things you do that are really organized and together. I think you're going to do really well as an organized person. But that, just hearing it one time like that might sound a bit odd, but when kids get used to their parents balancing the negative with the positive, then that becomes their strongest programs are those become the positives. And the parent who practices doing that, it becomes so natural that the kids get used to it. And that's the reason why there are so many people today who are successful, who, when you ask them why they're successful, so many of them will tell you, my parents told me I could accomplish anything, that I could do anything. So that's the sign of a parent who's got it and who's always replacing the negative with the positive. So it doesn't mean you can't discipline, which really means to make a disciple of. It means that you can correct, but always show them the best of what they can do so that they can begin to imprint pictures of that in their brain, and they will. And then they'll follow that because the brain follows its strongest programs.
Wow. I'm so happy that I read your books and understood this before I had children. Because I like to think that I did that very thing with my children. Maybe not 100% all the time. But I have two sons and a daughter, and they're just great kids. And they're not even kids, they're young adults today. And many times I ask them, how you doing? So I'm doing great. Now, if they're sick, just I'm doing great, because they just won't hear me say that. And I'm not saying we're not going to have a bad day, okay? We all have that, of course. But their attitude is so great. And I, again, attribute that to the readings, your readings and your seminars. So I guess I answer so I was going to say, what is the best age to start teaching self-taught to children? Is there such thing as being too young? I guess you can start at any time. Is that correct? When they're first born?
Yeah, on the way home from the hospital is a good time.
Okay.
And if you think about it, when that little infant is in the hospital room with the mom, there's probably a television set up in the corner of the room turned on, saying bad things, and negative things. So start teaching them right away. The main thing to look out for, to watch for, is anything you say in the declarative to a child, like, you're so stupid, or I can't believe you're so clumsy, or you'll never be good at that, or I can't believe the thing you say. You never tell the truth. Those things are very hurtful, even if at the moment they appear to be true, because maybe the kid has just said something that isn't true. But watch the declarative things you say, because, well, as an example, when I was studying self-talk many years ago, and my two sons were very young, they were just little kids, I imagined that for 1 month, I couldn't talk to them, I couldn't say anything to them out loud. And I imagined that each of them had a little bitty keyboard, a computer keyboard strapped to their little chest, and it was wired right into their brain. And on the top of that little keyboard, there was a sign that said, Dad, Mom, everything you type into my keyboard will be stored and acted on for life, as though it's true. Please be careful. So I imagined that that's what I was facing when I saw my kids each day. And I recognized that if I could not speak to them for a month, if I could only type my messages, whatever I was going to say to them, if I had to type it in, that would cause me to stop and think. And I would never, ever type in something like, you're so stupid, or you'll never amount to anything. I realized that I would only type in things that would help them and nurture them and help them grow. And that stuck with me. And I've suggested that to many parents and many family members since that time, that if you're talking to a child, you're talking to that child's future. In fact, you're creating it.
Wow, wow, wow. So many great answers to these questions. Obviously, words of affirmation go a long way. I can see that. And because you want to uplift the child and nurture them, as you said, and that is absolutely fantastic. You know, maybe I'm wrong making the statement. Nothing is forever, and by that I mean this: when a person starts using self-talk pretty consistently, repetition, as you say, and now they get away from it, and they quit using self-talk or whatever the case may be, they get away from their own association. I know they can get back to it, but the self-talk they used in the past, is that all for naught, or does that make a difference in some way?
If a person has practiced positive self-talk and they've used it for a while, gotten used to it, got good at it, and then for some reason went away from it. Maybe something changed in their life and they forgot it. And then later on they decide to go back and work at it again. They'll get back much faster because those old programs are still there and they're just waiting to be brought back to life. So I encourage anyone who's had a down time, that's okay. You can get past it. You have a lot of programs that are working. You've got a lot of programs that like you and that are helping you. They're still there. They may have been kind of buried for a while, but they're still there. And you know they're still there or you wouldn't be living. So you've got a lot of great programs. Everyone does. And as soon as you start thinking and actually practicing the right kind of self-talk, those old programs will come back to life. They're old friends. They want your new self-talk to get in sync with how you really want to be. So they'll help you. They're still there.
You know, as you're responding to that question, I recall a seminar you did at one of my events, and you had a whiteboard on stage. And you talked about programming and how negative self-talk, you're not good enough, you're too fat, you're too big, you're stupid, and how you took a marker on the board and you put one from side to side to side to side and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper through negative repetition. And then as you start learning self-talk, you took an eraser and you lightly started erasing some of those old programs. Is that kind of what you're referencing? We can change that old programming that way by putting in.
Yes. In the brain, Angelo, in the brain, the neuroscientists refer to this process as pruning. So it's actually, in that sense, a scientific term, pruning, just like cutting the branches of a tree or a rose bush so that it will grow more fully. The brain prunes out old neural networks, old programs that we're no longer using or that we no longer need because we only have so much space in the brain. So it's trying to get rid of stuff we really don't need. And so when you stop using negative self-talk and replace it with a new kind of self-talk, positive self-talk, the brain will, over time, begin to prune out, actually get rid of old neural networks. And then once those are gone for good, once they're pruned out, then you're on the path to success. Then you're on the path to being more positive without even having to think about it.
We all need a prune, that's for sure. Interesting. You once told a story that made such an impact on me, and I think so many people can probably appreciate this because they can probably relate to it. You told a story of I believe it was, and you could set me straight on if I'm using the wrong explanation here or description of this talk. You gave a talk once about a college professor that told you when you were in college, I believe it was college, that you would never become a writer. Never become a writer. And obviously, for whatever reason, maybe it was high school, I don't remember, an essay or something, and they said it, I think you said they said it on your term paper to send back, you'll never become a writer. And then back to an alumnus get-together, you handed this college professor some of your top-selling books. Can you share that story? Because it made such an impact on me, and hopefully it'll help others.
Yes, it was actually in high school, and I wanted to write a book, and so I was working on a manuscript, and I took that manuscript to a teacher who I respected, and I I listened to that teacher, and it was an English journalism teacher, and I wanted her opinion. Basically, I wanted her to tell me that it was the world's greatest manuscript and it was going to become a best-selling book. And so I took it to class on a Friday, my manuscript, gave it to her and asked me, because I couldn't wait to hear what this teacher had to say, all of her glowing terms about my possible book. And when Monday came, I waited till the end of class. She asked me to stay after class. I sat in the front desk. She sat on the teacher's desk on the corner of it, holding my manuscript, looking down at me, and just kind of looking like she was going to hit me with my manuscript. And she said, "You will never write a best-selling book."
Whoa.
And then she went on to convince me. She went on to tell me that I didn't have the grammar, I didn't have the style, I didn't have what it took to be an author. And of course, I felt really bad. And I took the manuscript home and I put it on a top shelf along with the little typewriter that I had worked so hard to earn, and never took it down again. And had I not finally figured out the truth, that teacher was not telling me about me. That teacher was telling me about her, but her disbelief in herself had caused her to fail to believe in other people. And when I realized that, oh, this is up to me. It's up to my own self-talk, not hers. And so I was able to change those programs, but it took a long time to do it. And I see so many of us actually go through that. We go, why don't we get better sooner? Because we got to get rid of a lot of that old stuff that we got from other people first.
Wow. You know, in spite of the fact that she gave you that negative self-talk, he said you'll never write a best-selling book. Do you realize so many counselors in school, so many young people at your age at that time, my age at that time, who we believe that they're authorities in life, and they say things we believe. And like you're a counselor, when you're in high school, and they tell you you are college material or you're not. And you should do that, and we believe that. In spite of that, what made you have good positive affirmations or good positive programs before that, or what caused you in spite of that to move on? I mean, it just amazes me. I mean, many young people your age would have believed that and go no further in life. I'm so thankful that you did this in spite of that. What caused it?
The reason I was able to turn that around is because I set a goal. I'm a strong believer in goals. Goals focus our attitudes, goals focus our attention, goals focus our actions. And if they're focused in the right direction and we stay with it, and we believe in perseverance and endurance, then we never stop. And so fortunately, I was a goal setter. And because of that, I decided I can make this work. To write that first book, to actually write the book that ended up being What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, I actually, to get away from all of the negative and the people who did not believe in me, I went away to an island off the coast of Texas for 3 months by myself and wrote the book in solitude, because it's like the high school counselor or the college counselor who says, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. And my answer internally became, but you're not me. I'm me, and I will do that. And that takes some resolution, and that takes a lot of positive self-talk. But fortunately, I grew up in an environment where it was okay to believe in ourselves. And so I ended up doing that again.
Wow. You said something when I asked that question about that professor saying negative things to you. And you said something, what they're really talking about is themselves, or the lack of belief in self. And it's amazing because they think you can't write a bestseller. They're probably saying to themselves, I couldn't write a bestseller. Is that kind of what I heard you saying? I mean, without saying it?
Yes, most attitudes are all attitudes are a reflection of the programs that the person who has the attitude has in their brain. So if that person has that counselor or that teacher, whoever it is, or that friend or that anyone around us, what the attitude that we see them express is actually a picture of the program that they carry in their brain, and their brain believes those are true. So that's why you have to be kind of careful about people's opinions and other people's attitudes, because it's just their programs. It's also why I refuse to argue with anyone, because I would just be arguing with their programs. It's not, that person wasn't born that way. They got programmed, and now I'm talking to their programs. So I'm not going to argue with them. I'm just going to go about my life and wish them the best and help them if I can. But it makes sense that if you always recognize that the people around you also have programs, and they believe that their programs are the right ones, then that tells you a great deal about why people do what they do. And it also allows us to go on with our own lives and not live our lives based on the attitudes or the programs of someone else.
Oh, very good. Well, I'm going to ask one last question. I'm going to wind down here, Shad. I think too much of your time already, and I so appreciate that. Your website is full of excellent information with books and streaming materials. I go to that often, shadhelmstetter.com. For someone just starting out, where do you suggest they begin? I know you have self-talk for children and network marketers. Where do you suggest they begin? Or if they want to get into self-talk, where do you suggest they begin? What do you first read or listen to? They're already reading your books, probably, and if not, I'm going to encourage that. But where should they begin in terms of materials that they can get on streaming from your website?
That website is selftalkplus.com. And I really like that website. I'm very high on it because it's helping literally thousands and thousands of people get their self-talk right. And it's based on this. For years, I've been writing and recording self-talk that people could listen to. And it's because at one time in my past, I was a foreign language interpreter. I was a Spanish-English interpreter for the US government in Cuba. And I learned when I was learning foreign language that we learn foreign language by hearing it and through repetition and then by expressing it. And when I started writing self-talk that I felt other people could use and learn from, I used the exact same method and system that we use to teach a foreign language. So when you listen to self-talk, and now on that website I mentioned, it's a streaming service, so you can listen to it anytime, anywhere. What you're really doing is teaching yourself a new language, only it's in English, but it's a new vocabulary, it's a new way to think, it's a new way to speak. And remember, the key is repetition, repetition, repetition. So the more you listen, and the more often you listen, the more that new, positive, helpful, strong, action-based self-talk will begin to take over. And when you're getting started, I recommend that people start with whatever, there are many, many subjects that you can listen to and practice self-talk in. Play it in the background. Don't pay much attention to it. When we were little kids, we learned our first language just by hearing it in the background. We didn't have to go to school to learn our first language. Listening to self-talk is the same way. So don't make a big issue of it. Just play it in the background as you're going about your day. And there are self-talk programs for network marketing and so on, some of my favorite actually. But I would also listen to programs like self-talk for self-esteem, which means self-talk for how to create the right opinion of yourself. Now start with those basics and then just let it play in the background. And then when you go through the list of subjects available, you'll find the ones that you want to work on most.
I know the book that, two of the books you just put out. I like to warn a 60-minute book. I actually read it in 1 hour. I think you programmed me by reading it 60 minutes, so I timed it. But, negative self-talk and how to change it. Simple book, maybe less than 90 pages long. So great, really explains it in detail. Pretty much detail. I mean, it made a difference for me. And the other book, The Secret Words of Success. I'm reading that now, and I just love them both. And I'm going to recommend this to everybody. And like you have. And let me just say this in closing, Chad. I want to thank you for taking the time today for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. And I assure you, we will all benefit from this interview today. And, Brit Worldwide and Amway Corporation so respects you for many appearances that you've had with us and the materials you provide for everyone's well-being. I just cannot thank you enough, Chad. Again, I thank you for your time. Say hello to your family for us, your grandchildren, who I met your granddaughter at one of the seminars I attended with you. And good luck to you. And just know that we so respect you and we just love you dearly, my friend. And God bless you and thank you for everything you've always done for us.
My best to you. God bless.
Good day, Chad. Thank you very much, sir.
Yo, BWT, what's going on? What an incredible day. Absolutely. What's going on? That was great. Right here.
Yeah!
Absolutely awesome. We're so excited for what's to come tonight. We got some heavy